Hello Commander community, it's been a long while since we last spoke, and in that time a new set appeared, Ravnica Allegiance, the second in the Return to Ravnica 2 Electric Boogaloo pseudo-block. Let's just be frank, this might as well be a block for all intents and purposes. It's this Guilds of Ravnica and the War of the Sparks. That sounds epic, but hopefully it'll be a proper conclusion to this Bolas vs. Gatewatch shindig we have going on. That aside, we have a bunch of new cards to look at. Whether you're looking to go down to Friday Night Magic to draft this set, buying a bundle to crack some packs, or just looking at Card Kingdom longingly as you hope to win the lottery to afford those Mythic Edition awesome cards, there's a lot of fluff to sort through. I'm here today to try to help out, as in this video we're going to go over what I think are the best cards to get from the Ravnica Allegiance, me, the guy who definitely has an idea of what's going on here. So sit back, relax, maybe hit that like button, and let's get our Rakdos on. So let's start out with our mono white cards, which usually exist at the low end of the power scale for Commander. Angel of Grace is a 5-drop 5/4 angel with both flying and flash. When it enters the battlefield until the end of turn, any damage that would reduce your life total to below 1 reduces your life total to 1. This is a potent hand trap to keep in the off chance that you're losing a little too much. Being able to survive a lethal swing can make the difference between winning a game and losing a game. You can also pay 6 and exile it from your graveyard to make your life total become 10. Again, another great ability for when you find yourself in a pinch. Angelic Exhaustion is another 4-drop enchantment that reads, whenever the creature you control attacks alone, it gets a +X/+X until the end of turn, where X is the number of creatures you control. This card is basically Sublime Archangel without the keyword Exalted. It might not be as good a card as the Archangel in that it's not a creature, and that it doesn't count as an Exalted trigger, but it's still a worthwhile ability to have in a deck that might not always want to swing wide with a large board state. Forbidding Spirit is interesting. It's like a limited effect Ghostly Prison. When it enters your battlefield until your next turn, creatures your opponents control can't attack you or your Planeswalkers unless they pay 2 mana for each creature. I like this card for what it does, but it has a very niche spot in the format, likely to show up in decks like Brago, Rune, and other Blinky Blink decks that can get multiple uses out of that Enter the Battlefield ability. This likely won't see too much of an inclusion in decks like Grand Arbiter that might want the ability but lack the power to reuse it past the first turn cycle, but it's still a cool card to note. Hero of Precinct 1 is something I'm including in the off chance that this theory of mine is correct. One of the most popular strategies in Modern I hear on the grapevine is a multicolor human tribal deck, and while I haven't yet faced this deck myself, I do believe that a Commander variant exists out there, and I imagine this card might be quite some value engine for it. Getting a creature token out of each casting of a specific type of spell is something strong in Commander, as we've seen in instances like Icar Markov, so I wait eagerly to see what this can bring to the table. Tithe Drinker might just be one of the top white cards from this set for our format. It's a 2-drop 2/1 with an ability similar to Grand Abolisher. While it's your turn, your opponent's spells cost 1 more to cast, and non-mana abilities cost 1 more to activate. It also has Afterlife 1, so when it dies you get a 1/1 white and black flying spirit creature token. This can really hinder opposing interactions during your turn, leaving you much more open to act without the worry of a response. Mesmerizing Benthid is a 5-drop 4/5 octopus. When it hits the battlefield, you create 2 0/2 blue illusion tokens with, whenever this creature blocks a creature, that creature does not untap during its controller's next untap step. It also has hexproof while you control an illusion. This can definitely help give you 2 handy blockers that can deter a great many attacks. Most creatures will want to be able to swing at you this turn as well as next turn, and risking their opponents being tapped down for 2 whole rounds at the table might be too risky for them to want to attack you. Persistent Petitioners is a 2-drop 1/3 human advisor with a few abilities. You can tap it and pay 1 and have a target player mill 1. You can tap 4 untapped advisor creatures you control to have a target player mill 12. Lastly, your deck can run any number of Persistent Petitioners. Hello Shadowborn Apostle, I've seen what you did to black after seeing Josh Lee Kwai's Athreos deck. The next best way to revisit this ability would of course be in blue. Given that we have cards like Mind Over Matter to possibly reuse that mill 12 ability, this can be really potent in a mill deck. I would also like to point out that this thing does have 3 toughness on a 2-drop creature and in the same colors as Phoenix, one of the best mill strategy commanders. What I really like about this card is that it has a slight support for advisors as a tribe. This is one of those instances where a relatively small tribe has been given some kind of support, and while this is only one card, advisor does exist in a few other cards that might make this something to look at. I also feel that because it has the clause to break the one of ruling commander, this might be something you'd like to grab a few copies of pretty early on before the supply dwindles. Verity Circle is a rather interesting enchantment. For 3 mana, whenever a creature becomes tapped and is not tapped from attacking, you can draw a card. You can also pay 5 mana to tap down a target non-flyer, so this is basically a control piece and a card draw engine. It can be used to deter a lot of green mana dorks, as their tap for mana ability will net you a card draw, making them somewhat harmful to their controller as you rifle through your deck a lot quicker. You also have the ability to tap down whatever you don't want swinging in, so as long as it doesn't have flying, you will also gain a card. Run this with Archetype of Imagination and everything your opponents control is fair game. Awaken the Erwile is a 5-drop sorcery. Everyone discards their hand, and then they create a number of 2/2 zombies equal to the number of cards they discarded. I find this is going to find a home in not just a deck like Nekusar that maybe doesn't want the opponents to hold on to those cards they draw, but is also gravy for decks like Nath of the Guiltleaf, who will benefit from discard effects. And note that this doesn't just kill one player's hand, this empties everyone's hand. Pontiff Agony is curious. I'm not super big on decks that revolve around paying life, the coin suicide black decks, but I know they exist. This card will benefit off of that by offering creature removal that is dependent on you paying life. Note that this requires the life be paid and does not consider loss of life through burn spells or damage as part of the requirements. Pestilence Spirit is one of my favorite spells from the deck. This 3-drop 3/2 comes with both Menace and Death Touch. It also gives your instants and sorceries Death Touch. Read that a second time. Instants and sorceries you control gain Death Touch, so whatever damage they might be dealing to your creatures is enough to destroy them. Suddenly, cards like Electricity that can ping each creature you don't control for 1 damage is a board wipe. This grossly inflates the impact of some of these low-cost ping spells that they'll deal 1 damage to each creature by making it lethal. Depending on what you bring to the table, you can seriously fend off the biggest board states with ease, and this is definitely one of the best black cards in the set. Mirror Match is the only card in red from the set that I really feel has a potential in Commander. Whenever a non-token creature enters your battlefield, you flip a coin until you lose a flip, and then for each flip 1, you create a token copy of that creature. These tokens get haste and then they exile at the end of turn. This is very much a high-risk, high-reward type of card and benefits the most when you have a card that you might want additional instances of. I very much like this in an Okon Eye of Chaos deck. Maybe a coin flippy themed deck might have a potential. Biogenic Ooze might be the new best friend to the Mimeoplasm. When it enters play, you get a 2/2 Oozy Boy. At the beginning of your end step, you put a 1/1 counter on each ooze you control, and you can pay 4 to create another 2/2 Oozy Boy. So this is a nice little support for Ooze Tribal, something we're going to see later on is pretty common in Simic cards, but it offers a nice buff and it can spawn out creatures, so I like it. Guardian Project is perhaps the best green card of the set. Whenever a non-token creature enters your battlefield, if it doesn't have the same name as another creature you control or in the graveyard, you draw a card. This is Commander, and unless you're running a deck of those advisors we mentioned earlier, you should always be drawing cards off of this. Biomancer's Familiar is a 2/2 for a green and a blue that cheapens the activated abilities cost of your creatures by 2 mana, but it can't go below 1 mana. You can also tap it to let a creature with an adapt ability adapt as though it did not have any +1/+1 counters on it. Now I want to pause really quick because I do want to explain what adapt is. I haven't touched upon it in this video because I really don't believe it is at all an ability that's great in Commander. So it lets you pay a cost to put a number of +1/+1 counters on a creature based on the individual card's adapt, but only if it currently has no counters on it already. The Familiar has the ability to let you adapt a creature several times despite it having the counters on it, making the adaptability more effective, but I still don't really consider it an ability that I would build around yet, but that first ability is pretty powerful. Bedevil is a neat little spell for 3 mana, letting you eliminate a target artifact, a creature, or a planeswalker. Rakdos colors in general have a little bit of trouble with removal, often only targeting creatures. This lets you handle both planeswalkers and artifacts, making this effective against a multitude of threats. Captive Audience is a very fun Rakdos enchantment, and by fun I mean in a sadistic whips and chains sort of way. When you play this, an opponent gets control of it. Pick whoever you want to have the most fun with. At the beginning of their upkeep, they have to pick an ability that they haven't yet picked. They can choose to either make their life total become 4, they can choose to discard their entire hand, or they can choose to have each opponent create 5 2/2 black zombies. So in other words, they're still going to die, but a very slow and painful death. This is very reminiscent of Demonic Pact, except it goes to an opponent right out the way, and it doesn't have an option to flat out lose the game. It does, however, already have a place in a deck such as Xantcha, Sleeper Agent, who already likes to paint blatant targets on opponents. Frilled Mystic is Mystic Snake in another body. It's a 4 mana for a flashy counterspell on a creature. This one is an Elf Lizard Wizard. Gotta hand it to Simic for having the funkiest creature type combinations this time around. Growth Spiral is a 2-drop instant that lets you draw a card and then drop a land into play. It's an instant version of Coiling Oracle without the need to reveal anything to your opponents. Card draw and ramp on 1 spell, I'll take it. So, I do want to talk about the Hydroid Crisis, which at the time of the recording is the most expensive card from the set. I perceive this as a Simic redesign of Sphinx's Revelation, coming into play with +1/+1 counters on it equal to whatever you paid for X. You then draw cards and gain life equal to half of what you paid for X, rounded down. It also has flying and trample. So first off, this Jellyfish Hydra Beast, again, creature type win, can come in as a tremendous beat stick. You're in Simic colors and have access to some explosive amounts of ramp. Secondly, you gain life and get card draw out of it. Even though it's half of what you paid for X, you still have a giant jelly boy sitting on the battlefield. You're in a good spot when you cast this. I don't think it'll be that impactful in Commander, as besides it being big, bulky, and beneficial to play, it just offers no protection to itself and functions as little more than a giant beat stick, but that's just me. Jellyfish. Kaya's Wrath is a brutal board wipe in the same vein as Fumigate. In fact, it's basically Fumigate that costs 1 less and is Orzhov colors. Prime Speaker Vanifar is a 4-drop Simic legendary elf Oozy Wizard. You can tap her and sack another creature to tutor for a creature with CMC that's 1 greater than the sacrificed creatures. Activated only as sorcery. It's Birthing Pod on a stick, Birthing Pod on a commander stick. I think we're looking at one of the best Simic commanders we had in a long time, one that will definitely be working up a Birthing Pod combo deck. I don't play competitive CM commander. I feel like maybe this will have it, but expect to see this one a lot. Birthing Pod is brutally strong in commander, and this one sits in the command zone. Simic Ascendancy is by far my favorite of the set overall. It's a 2-drop enchantment with 1 activated ability. For 3 mana, you can put a +1/+1 counter on any creature you control. Whenever you put +1/+1 counters on a creature you control through any means, whether it be Simic Ascendancy or some other card, you put that many growth counters on the Simic Ascendancy. And at the beginning of your upkeep, if it has 20 or more growth counters on it, you win the game. So this is a win condition for Simic decks, and dedicated decks to counters will have no problem churning out those 20 growth counters. I would say that Uzuri is probably my first choice to go to with this deck, especially given the incredibly powerful synergy between Uzuri Claw of Progress and Sage of Hours. I also think Atraxa is the second deck I would want for this the most. With the plethora of proliferate triggers within her deck, I think it would be very easy to boost the +1/+1 counters on my creatures to trigger the Ascendancy on its own, and then proliferate the growth counters. Tome of the Guild Packs is one of the most newest staples I would say the format has gotten. This 5-drop artifact draws you a card whenever you cast a multicolored spell, like your commander, making it so you'll always draw a card when you cast your commander, and you can tap it to add 1 mana of any color, making it a mana rock and a card draw engine. So, before I go into the lands I think are good for Commander, there are 2 things I want to address. The shock lands that have been reprinted in the set obviously are the cards you want to go to while you can, just out of the value they offer your deck. They're perhaps the best dual lands you can grab for under $100, and with them being in Standard right now, they're going to be at their cheapest for a little while now. I'm not going to talk about them more, as it's kind of a beaten horse at this point to say that they're good. The lands I do want to talk about are the gates. For years, the gates were always at the forefront of budget brews, being very flavorful for Ravnica, if not rather slow takes on dual lands. You get either of the two guild's colors on a land that enters play tapped. With this Visit of Ravnica, we got a few more gate mechanic cards that actually might be pretty good for commander decks. The Gateway Plaza enters the battlefield tapped. Okay, when it hits play, you either sack it or pay 1 mana. It can then tap for 1 mana of any color. It's kind of an underwhelming Commander Tower-esque card, but with this set, we also got Plaza of Harmony, which if you control 2 or more gate cards, you gain 3 life. It can then tap for colorless, but more importantly, it'll tap for a mana of any color that a gate you control can produce. While the Gateway Plaza is in play, the Plaza of Harmony can tap for any color, making it a great budget option for your multicolored decks. And given that Maze's End is also a thing and grossly underplayed, I would find it interesting to see someone try to brew a 5-color gate deck that focuses on getting out Maze's End and utilizing all the gate support from the Ravnica sets as a strategy. So with that, we come to a close on this video. What cards are you considering getting from the Ravnica Allegiance? Are there cards you didn't hear us suggest that you think might be commander usable? Let me know in the comments. I know after making this video, I'll be going over to Card Kingdom to get a bunch of these and hone in on the good stuff I need, like that Asimic Ascendancy. Anyway, if you enjoyed this video, remember to like and share, and as always, I'll catch you guys, gals, and NB pals next time.
Summer in the hills, those hazy days I do remember. We were running still, had the whole world at our feet, watching seasons change.